Good evening, and welcome to another edition to Views of the Fifth. We are very excited about tonight. We have two great guests on that's going to be talking about veterans and the issues that we have going on, not only in our nation, but get great perspective of two of the best and brightest who have served our country extremely well. So we're very excited about tonight. As we know, South Carolina is a huge military state. We are the home of 6 military bases here. Nearly every South Carolinian shares a connection with a service member who has risked it all for this nation. So we have a deep commitment and appreciation for our military force here, not only in the state, but throughout this country. So this is a very important conversation for us to have. We got to ensure that we're taking care of our veterans. Again, they do sacrifice everything for this country, so it makes no sense for us not to take care of them. So I want to introduce our esteemed panelists tonight. One of them I've known since 2010, and one of my mentors, and I'm very, very honored to have him here. And another one is a resident or constituent here of the 5th District. And so we're going to start with her first, Lieutenant Colonel Sylvia Pratt. She is out of the Air Force branch. She became an officer in 1969 and after graduating from college. And I'm going to give her a second to give you a little bit more about her and how she got into the military and what she accomplished during her time there. And then we'll go to General Hank Taylor after that. Sylvia?
Okay. Please call me Sylvia. I've been retired enough now so that it feels like Sylvia. Some of this is going to be talking to General Hank. We would just met each other and found out that we were both in the Strategic Air Command. Hank, were you ever stationed in North Dakota?
TDY.
My not. Why not? My not. I went in the Air Force as soon as I graduated from college. I was born in Sumter. I am part of the 5th District. After school, I just wanted to do something because my age at that time, the only thing expected of women was that you get married and have children. And I thought maybe if I went in the Air Force, it was a 4-year commitment and I could have fun for 4 years and then do my duty as a Southerner and get married and get pregnant and the only things open to women at that time, which is so different from now, was admin, personnel, and that's it. So I was a protocol officer for a good while. I can smile through anything, after that. I was so lucky, and this is why I love the military. Let's just be honest, I love the Air Force. And I was teasing Hank about it earlier. I'm from Sumter. It's a small town in comparison to Washington, D.C. I'm from Sumter, South Carolina. And when I was the first lieutenant, I was the military aide for Colonel Buzz Aldrin. Now, if you don't recognize his name, the Apollo 11 was the mission that landed on the moon. The first man on the moon was Neil Armstrong. The second man was Buzz Aldrin, Colonel Aldrin. He used to say that the biggest Jeopardy question in the world was who was the second man on the moon. But he was the commandant of the test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base. And I met so many of the astronauts. I went to the launch of Apollo 14. And I would sit there thinking, I'm from Sumter. How did this happen to me?
Right.
And from there, I had a chance to go to Hawaii. So I thought I'll put it off a little bit longer. Then I got a chance to go to South Korea. I was stationed at Osan Air Base, Korea. It's what's called an isolated assignment, 1 year only. You're there and it's isolated because you're alone. And I'm talking really, I guess, to people who don't know about some of the assignments
Mm.
I kind of got a chuckle, and you probably did too, Hank, when President Trump didn't go up to the DMZ, because I'd been up there 4 times, and it kind of gets your attention when you see those North Koreans over there, but you follow the rules and nothing happens. And for the first time in my life, I worked with people, and Mo, you're going to have to give me because I could run on a little bit.
It's all
I
good.
had an opportunity to work. Got to know my counterpart and his family, my counterpart who was Korean. And I got to know them, and I saw how the United States worked with another country. And it was opening a whole new world for me. Then I was stationed at the Pentagon, and that was eye-opening to see. I was working with things that were so much bigger than I ever imagined. And when I was 27, they opened flight training to women, and I was too old. So they finally opened missile operations to women, and I was in the first class that had women. And from then on, everywhere I went, I was the first woman, generally the only woman.
Mm.
When I was the squadron exec for a Minuteman III squadron at Minot, I found out from a bartender my nickname was Mom.
Oh,
I
wow.
was Hank as a squadron as a general, the exec gets a lot. And I had 127 guys working for me and 1 woman admin. And it was at the Pentagon when I decided that I was involved in something so much bigger than me. And I never really wanted children. I don't have the mommy gene. So I decided to put everything I had into the Air Force and to getting promoted, and because it's up or out. And from Minot, I don't know how many people remember during the Persian Gulf War, the news media fell in love with the cruise missiles. I worked with the Air Force cruise missiles were nuclear, and I worked with nuclear weapons from then on. And I was stationed in Italy, then the Netherlands. And by then I had built up credibility with the missile people, missileers. But Reagan and Gorbachev had this talk and decided no more nukes in Europe. And as a lieutenant colonel, they decided, okay, you're generic, you can do things. And I was sent to Simbach, Germany, Simbach Air Base, Germany, and I had to work with pilots, fighter pilots. You know what I'm talking about. You know why I'm laughing. Because fighter pilots are a different breed. And what was even more interesting is I had an EOD squad working for me. They're the bomb diffusers. And much to their chagrin, they were so embarrassed. They were the only EOD squad in the entire United States Air Force working for a woman. And they reminded me daily, I think. Hank, you can appreciate this more. I feel so lucky. A 3-star general whom I had known since he was a major, told me that everywhere I had been since I went into missiles, I had been the first woman or the only woman, and I had broken enough barriers. So the good old boy network wasn't going to promote me again.
Oh, wow.
And I had a choice. I still could have stayed in longer. My sister was in Charleston. She was a diabetic and had been a diabetic since she was 9. And she was having She was on kidney dialysis and open heart surgery and all. So when I hit the 20-year point, I decided to go ahead and retired to Charleston, which I dearly love. And then the one thing that I can do so well is move. So after my dad died, my mom was in Charlotte, and I moved up to Charlotte. And after she died, I moved to what I lovingly refer to as the old folks' home. It's Sun City, Carolina Lakes, here in Indian Land, South Carolina, in Lancaster. And
That's
now,
it.
how long, which base were you at, Grand Forks or North Dakota? Or Minot?
I went to them all. I was on the SAC MSET team, so we visited every place SAC had airplanes.
In
Do you
the
want me
winter?
to talk?
Yeah. I
Don't
think
go north in the winter.
I think it'd be great. I think it would be great to
Yeah,
have General Taylor to tell a little bit about yourself as well. And before we go into that, I will say I have known Hank, and I can say that because we go back for almost 10 years now, more than 10 years. No, 10 years exactly, because 2010 I started at Department of Commerce. Everyone at this point knows I worked at the Department of Commerce. Well, one of the first people I met at the Department of Commerce was Senior Project Manager Hank Taylor. And he took me under his wings and started helping me become a professional. And the one advice that he gave me that I not the only advice, but one advice that he gave me that I've taken throughout my whole professional career is, Mo, whatever you do, don't take lunch at your desk. Go out. He told me that. And I have adhered to that my entire professional career. But with that, General Taylor, let people know who you are, where you come from, your dedication to service, and what you're currently doing now.
Well, before we got started, and Mo gave me an idea about Sylvia and her career, and I said, I like to listen to people like that.
Yeah.
And now you know why, right?
Right.
You can sit and listen to people like that. So thank you so much, Sylvia, for sharing a little bit of yourself with us. My name is, as Mo mentioned, I'm Hank Taylor. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. Originally grew up here in Charleston. I had the privilege of serving in two branches of our military. I served in the Navy, first as a radio man, with my last assignment in the Navy being in Vietnam. So I had the opportunity of the first time returning from war was coming home from Vietnam. And so if we talk about that a little later on, I'm more than glad to share, because that was a war that was surrounded by a whole different set of circumstances than what we find ourselves in now. But it was a important experience for me. Coming back from Vietnam, I decided to go back to college. In between, I got married. And I went back to college and went through Air Force ROTC at Cole College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was the Cadet Corps commander, among several other leadership positions on campus. But then I got a commission in the Air Force in 1975, and I served 30 years as an aircraft maintenance officer. Most of that time was spent in the Strategic Air Command, as Sylvia was mentioning, SAC, as we called it back then. As you know, we had two legs of the triad for our nuclear mission for the United States, intercontinental ballistic missiles and bombers. And I spent all of my time in aircraft maintenance around bombers, B-52s, three models of B-52s. My last operational assignment in maintenance was with the B-2 bomber. I was the first logistic group commander for the B-2. And so we were responsible for building the infrastructure for turning a stealth bomber into an operational airplane. And so I did that at Whiteman Air Force Base in the 509th. My last assignment in the Air Force was at the Pentagon. I was the vice director for logistics on the Joint Staff, and I was there during our second experience in Iraq. I say second because the first one, Desert Storm, I was a squadron commander for Desert Storm over in the Middle East. Back in 1990, served as a squadron commander in charge of flight line maintenance operations. But my last assignment was at the Pentagon on the Joint Staff, and we had a chance to go to war in Iraq for the second time. And because of the demands, at that time, I was hitting close to 30 years in the Air Force. We had both of our kids already graduated college. My wife has already decided that we were going to come back to Charleston. And so that became my terminal assignment, and I came back home. And my military experience has served me well in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But Sylvia mentioned the idea of selfless service, serving something bigger than yourself. And Moe, I met Moe at the Department of Commerce. That was in my pursuit of serving something bigger than me, which was the idea of bringing jobs and opportunities to South Carolina. So we got to go all over the world, selling South Carolina to the world. And then finally, I served here in our regional area for economic development at the Charleston Regional Development Alliance. And after doing that for 3 years, I finally retired in 2014, and I've been retired since. Actively involved in several economic development initiatives in the region and several boards, et cetera. So when Moe asked me to be a participant and to express my support for what he's trying to do and continuing his effort for selfless service, I was more than glad, and I'm very honored to be on the call tonight. Look forward to your questions, and if you want me to go in for details, I will do that, but I will give you a chance, Moe, to get into your question if you want to do that.
You know, that's fantastic. And, you know, both of y'all are just amazing examples of American patriots. And, you know, I sit here as I aspire to be a congressman for the 5th District. And the word service, I find myself routinely going back to it. To be a servant leader, what does that mean? How do you think outside of yourself, empathize with people, understand the gifts that you are given and the responsibilities that you have to give it back? And the word I always come back to is service. And so even with running this campaign, as I tell my team and my staff, you know, we need to be cognizant of how we project our positions out into the ether, and be conscious of what we're tasked with, and that's serving the people of the 5th District. And as 2 members of the military that literally know when you take that oath that your life is going to be laid down, could be laid down for this country, can both of you just speak to what service mean to you, especially right now with a divided country? And I think we need to kind of heal and remember what Americanism is. Can you speak to service and what that mean and how we should perceive that as Americans?
Go ahead, Sylvia. I'll let you go first. Sylvia, I'll let you go first.
Okay. People are saying a lot that we're a divided country. Hank, I think you can talk to this too, but I don't think we're as divided as people think. Vietnam divided people. I mean, nobody, every day there were hundreds of people at the White House. And the reason that President Johnson did not run for re-election was because he couldn't handle the stress of all these, every day. Vietnam that was bad. I think that really, and I've talked to a few Vietnam vets who said that, because I wondered how they felt after the Persian Gulf War and now seeing people coming back as heroes, and they came back and were treated very poorly. And they said it actually helped the healing. For me, the service, every once in a while you get into a conversation with people, but to me personally, after living in other countries, I really felt like, and still feel like, I had an opportunity to say thank you to my country for for being born here. I could have been born in France, Russia, Poland, India, Philippines, South America, Somalia, but I was born in America, and that is the greatest thing. I think we are the greatest country. And we have 2 original sins. We stole this country from Native Americans, and we brought slavery here. But including that, this country, when you think about it, we're a new country and we are made up 100% of rejects and losers and people who were kicked out of their homes, all types of different backgrounds, the Native American traditions, the traditions that the slaves brought. And I grew up with that music, with Gullah and the Italians. Once you got into the immigration coming over, they were all the Irish potato famines. The Russian Jews were kicked out of their country. Everybody came here poor. And we created a bunch of poor people who couldn't speak each other's language and certainly didn't understand each other's cultures. And we made a great country that has a great sense of survival, a great sense of doing things for each other. And in the military, you see it because you always help each other out. And our country was so great that we went over to Europe and bailed them out of World War twice, and then turned around and bailed out, and this was a country of poor people that came together and were great. And so I think of this country as great people. It's just a matter right now of reminding each other of that sometimes.
Right.
I learned so much from each place I was stationed and from each country I lived in. There's nowhere better. I'll shut up now. I could go on a little way.
That was fantastic. You got me tearing up over here. That was great.
But no, it's you. Being an American is the greatest privilege.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that, Sylvia. And you've hit on a couple of things that's been a constant thread in my military career. So when I talk about service, I will share it from two perspectives. First, as a young sailor in Vietnam, the first time you find that people are looking to do you harm simply because of you're an American.
Mm.
And so when you find yourself, and when I found myself in those circumstances, I asked myself, why would somebody put themselves in a position like this? Mm. And that was the first time I had to wrestle with the idea of what is service. And so service is not about yourself. Military service is not about you. Yeah. Military service is commitment to something bigger than you. For me, the seeds for that became our Constitution. Yeah. And the principles embedded in our Constitution. Now, every person in the military takes an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic. And so when you talk about service, to me, it is commitment to principles. Mm. Now, the second thing I would add for service, and Sylvia, this is something you and I have directly in common. It comes from the Air Force's core values. There are 3 core values in the Air Force: integrity first, excellence in all you do, and service above self. And that third one, service above self, is the living, breathing demonstration of selfless service. And so I lived that for 30 years. And so when you say service to me, it is commitment to principles embedded in our Constitution that I find to be so great that I'm willing to give my life for them in the support of those. But more importantly, I think they're so great that they should apply to everybody in the world. Yeah. And for us in the United States who are lucky to live under those principles, I think we owe it to each other to make sure those principles survive. And that's the challenge that we're seeing right now in your election, Mo. Yeah. How do we stand up for the principles and constitutional institutions built by our forefathers? Now, I do a lot of reading on history, presidencies, and how our Constitution came to being. It's a phenomenal document. Mm-hmm. It was devised by imperfect men, mm-hmm. but men who had a perfect vision. Yeah. They knew our country would get bigger. They knew our country would get more complicated. And so they tried to put in place in our Constitution some foundations that allow us to batter those storms as we move toward that more perfect union. So two things on service. What I learned in Vietnam, number two is the core values that Sylvia and I lived under as we served in the United States Air Force. And for me, it all comes back to serving our Constitution.
Speaking of the Constitution, I want to tell you, Lancaster is not a rich county. You live in a rich county.
I live in Dorchester. I live in Dorchester, Cam.
Like I said, you live in a rich county. Lancaster is not. So I kind of adopted the English and language arts department at the local middle school, and trying to give the teachers there, each month I would put together a box. And I went on Amazon, and I think you'd like to at least look at it. I bought me a copy and have given other copies to friends. I looked up, and I've never heard of them before until John Lewis's book March came out, and it's called a graphic novel. There's a graphic novel about the U.S. Constitution, and it is so good. It explains why the Second Amendment is important, because people needed to carry their weapons for, to get food. And one of the things, it made me start thinking about the Second Amendment in South Carolina, where I grew up. Getting your first BB gun was a bonding experience with your dad. Mm. And that's why I am very much against too many guns out there, because I do not have one, because I know I would fire. I had to wear one on missile crew duty, and after, if you were in the Persian Gulf, yeah, you're real familiar with them. Mm-hmm. But this book is really good and cheap too. I wouldn't have gotten it, because I usually get 4 or 5 books for them each month. But
I just wrote that down, Sylvia, so I'll be following up on that. I do a lot of reading now, particularly being home.
When you said that, and when you talked about history, I didn't realize how much history I was learning in the Air Force, because when you retire, you have to give the speech, and I wanted to keep mine as short, sweet, and simple. And I said, I am finally ready to take my American history final and my world history final, because beforehand history was boring. Read it, memorize it, take the test, dump it, repeat. And then as I drove across the country on my way to assignment in California, I realized that there's no way I would have been a pioneer if I didn't have if I had to go over there in an unair-conditioned Conestoga wagon.
I was about to say, you made sure you had air conditioning, right?
Right.
Oh, no.
Right.
But
hey, Sylvia, you put a bug in my ear. You put a thought on my mind that I'd like to share. I want to share before I forget it, if you don't mind. But you put and Mo, this is in line.
It is.
This is in line with your idea of what happens to veterans when they come home. Sylvia mentioned the turbulent times that we have during the Vietnam War, and how that was so much different than what we saw with the Persian Gulf War. Now, I served in both, and so I had a chance to come home from both. When I came back from Vietnam, because of concern for our personal safety, we were advised to wear civilian clothes back home. So this is after spending a year in military utility uniforms for a whole year. They're advising you to come back home incognito. So you have to scrounge up civilian clothes. For me, it was in Saigon. You have to scrounge up civilian clothes. And so that when you got off the airplane here in the United States, it was much easier to blend into the crowd at the airport. That was coming home from Vietnam.
Mm.
Coming back from the Persian Gulf War, as I mentioned, I was a squadron commander over there. When we came back from the Persian Gulf War, about a month or so after being back, we were invited to Washington, D.C. for a national victory celebration. And we had a march and a big display of military hardware, military people. And then they put us on a train and took us up to New York City. And we were marching a parade through what they called the Canyon of Heroes. In other
You
words, a
were
ticker tape parade. Ticker tape parade. So remember, sneaking back into the country from Vietnam, ticker
Right.
tape parade coming back from the Persian Gulf.
Right.
At
He's
the end
not,
of at the end, yeah, at the end of the parade route, across the street from where we were disassembling were a group of Vietnam veterans. The two groups melded together as one. And the idea was this is for all of us.
Wow.
The point out of that story is that one of the most important things for veterans coming back home is how they're received and respected by our public.
Mm.
How our public receives and respect that. That's fuel for the commitment to serve.
Yeah.
You know, like when in Desert Storm, I spent a Christmas in Desert Storm. We got enough gifts from the American people to give every member in our camp 3 wrapped gifts.
Wow.
3 wrapped gifts. So the support from the American public is very, very important for our men and women who are wearing the uniforms, but also for those of us who've retired or left active duty service. I just want to share that. And Sylvia, you put that on my mind, so I wanted to make sure we shared that.
I wanted to ask you something.
That's
Since
fantastic.
you were in the Persian Gulf War, I met Moe March the 10th. Now, this is the first time I've become involved with politics in any way. From the military, you know, we're apolitical. We don't,
Okay.
you know, Whoever
Right.
the commander in chief is, that's who you go with.
Right.
And so I never really thought much about it. And I'll be honest, until 2016, and I started a savings account the 1st of December then, to be able to participate in this election. Anyway, I went to hear Moe because I don't know of a single thing, Moe, that my congressional representative has done. Nothing. It's like he's laying low in the grass so nobody will notice him and then nobody can blame him for anything.
Mm.
He's just, I really seriously don't know his stand on anything. I don't know anything that he's done or how he thinks about anything. Nothing. It's like, so that's why I went to hear you speak. And what intrigued me, and I don't think I mentioned this to you, it was interesting, Hank, to see him and how he handled people 3 times his age. And he's but it was kind of fun to see that.
Yeah.
And as I talked to him some more, and then as I was walking to my car, I was trying to think who my heroes of military. Who does he remind me of? And Moe, you remind me of General Colin Powell.
Wow.
He,
Wow.
some of it, Hank will recognize some of this. First of all, he's very quiet,
Wow.
soft-spoken. His rules were have a plan and know your exit plan, right? They went into this through his, they didn't have an exit plan. And his big thing was to avoid another Vietnam, have a plan, execute your plan,
And get out.
and have an exit plan.
Yeah.
But General Colin Powell, and to me, he'll always be General Powell, and other people see him as secretary, but.
Right.
And I wanted to say one other thing. I'm assuming that you have some people listening to us, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
They should.
I was surprised at my reaction the first time I made a donation it made me feel good. I can't quite explain it. It made me feel like I was participating, I was doing something. I wasn't just, I've always voted. So this was, even a $10 donation gives a feeling of being part of freedom, being part of Congress, being part of the United States.
Right.
I can't explain it too well, but it makes you feel good. And I know right now I'm extremely lucky that I have my retirement and investments. There are an awful lot of people who don't have the money and who are suffering a lot.
Right.
And again, looking back to my current congressman, to my knowledge, he hadn't done a thing.
Well, I will say this. Thank you. One, that is that comparison. I don't even know what to say about that. It's honor to you for me to hear you think of me that way. And more importantly, I feel that responsibility of that. And going through this campaign, I told my team, and I think you appreciate this, Hank, as a project manager. You got to think in terms of how you win the project, and you got to be able to actively listen to what the company is telling you that they need, whether that's in written form, whether that's the research that you do on the front end, whether that's the meetings that you set up and you bring people to the table, and each one of them you build on to get to the crescendo, which could be a month's time, or it could be over years you work a project. And the objective,
we know that one.
Yeah. The objective is to win. And those things move. You got to be fluid. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to do what you need to win these projects that ultimately means more jobs and investment for South Carolinians. That was that job. And I think in the military, you have to think in similar terms, or even playing and as an athlete, think in those terms. What am I doing as a part of this cog to move this wheel towards a more perfect union, in the sense of me running for Congress to make the district better? And so we think about strategically how we're building bricks. I say it all the time, we got to build bricks. We're building a brick, so when people actually look at the house, they see that it's solid foundation. And I think as a country, as Americans, we have to push back all the partisanship. We got to push back all the hatred, the racism, and really focus on these issues that you were alluding to, and make sure that we are addressing these issues specifically, each and every one of us as Americans, as those poor Americans came and found a way to transition this country from its infancy into the greatest, as you said, the greatest country in the world. And I do too believe that we are still great. But we got some duty for us right now, and that's November 3rd, to ensure that people who believe the way that we do, that believe in this country, trust in this country, a small South Carolina boy from small town South Carolina, boy from Belton, South Carolina, been to Rome, been to Munich, been to the UK, been to Costa Rica, been to Australia. Like, how does that happen? But for America. So it is. Yeah. It is great, and we can do this. And so, we've been going. It's been a great conversation, and one of the things I want to ask, kind of towards the end, we know that veterans need help in a lot of different ways. From suicide prevention to make sure that they're not having unacceptable wait times just to get medical attention. We got to ensure that they have great jobs when they come back. These are the 0.0001% of our population, and it makes no sense for us not to take care of veterans. And so, as I aspire to be the congressman for the 5th district, what are the things that you would like for me to consider as I move towards this position? And if I am elected on November 3rd, that should be a priority for veterans as we move forward in this country.
Okay, I'll go first on this one, Sylvia. That's okay. I did give this some thought. What the heads up that Garrett gave me, and so I would say, Mo, there are two categories of things that would be important for veterans as a congressman. The first one is take care of vets who need it, and by that I mean those who need housing should have a roof over their heads. Those who need medical attention should not only have the facilities to get it, but also have the skilled clinicians, doctors, etc., to give it to them.
Mm.
And then the third thing is mental. Take care of those who need mental assistance. You know, the experience in war affects each of us in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, it's a never ending way, and they need mental assistance and mental help. So the first category, I would say, take care of vets who need it.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I would say is help vets who need a leg up. You know, there are some vets who come back from war, come back from military service, and they go to college.
Mm.
They take on a whole new life. So I think for those who need the leg up, I would focus on three categories. I would focus on employment, I would focus on education, and the final one I would focus on, which helps in building wealth, I would focus on home buying.
Mm.
Every vet should have a home.
Mm.
And I
Oh,
I
yeah.
would I would offer, as you go forward to represent the veterans in the 5th district, that you take a look at these two categories. Take
Oh,
care of vets who need it
right.
and help those who need a leg up.
Fantastic. That is a great advice, and we got that for sure, and we'll implement that as we roll out our policies of how we're going to take care of veterans. Sylvia?
He said it so well.
Right.
But I'm going to make an assumption here. Okay, you get elected. The House Armed Services Committee is very important. Their oversight of the VA.
Mm.
And I know from when I was stationed there at the Pentagon, a good friend of mine worked on the Hill. And I got to know a lot of what the congressional staffers do. And a lot of it is I would have one staffer who was in charge of Veterans Affairs. And on your web page or something, say for vets, this is your point of contact.
Okay.
There are so many varieties of different things, but the House Armed Services Committee, and there's several subcommittees, and I know it's an important one, but one of the reasons I personally want you elected is I want our Congress to look like the United States. I want some old white men and some old white women and some young black men and some young white men. I want some Muslims, Catholics, Jewish. I want a little bit of everything.
Right.
And if you don't require or ask to be on the House Armed Services Committee, and Shaw Air Force Base is a big, and I mean, it is. Hank, when was the last time you were at Shaw?
Last September.
Okay. I was in Sumter for a funeral about a year ago. And afterwards, I kept feeling like I wanted to go somewhere nice and quiet and think. And I ended up driving out to Shaw, got there about 6 o'clock, and they were having nighttime touch and go exercises with the fighters, which is not quiet. But I heard that jet noise and I thought, oh, how nice. This is, yeah, I feel so much better now. And like Hank and I didn't know each other, but right now, military people have a bond among each other.
I agree.
Yeah.
And Shaw Air Force Base has grown a lot in the past 10 years. It's a lot stronger, and it's not going to go away. So you have a valid reason to say you have a lot of military, and a lot of military stay there. As a matter of fact, I know one person who's retired who was my boss in the Netherlands. He was a Vietnam POW. He'd been in almost 5 years.
Okay.
And he was one of John McCain's roommates. And he's retired there. So the House Armed Services Committee and any of its subcommittees, you get on one of those. Yeah, but Hank, you're very eloquent. And
Well, thank you. I can listen to you all night, Sylvia, because when we start talking SAC, we'll be talking all night.
I know.
But Mo, one last thing, as you try to put a bow on this, I think it's important in every place you go, every audience you have a chance to talk with, when veterans come up, make sure we show them respect.
Sure.
The respect for the veterans is very, very important.
Absolutely. I completely agree 100%. I don't, that is sacred. The sacrifice that y'all make for this country to protect our freedoms. And you said it earlier, our principles, our guiding principles. And, I have not served in the military, but when I made the decision to run for Congress, it was very simple for me. Mo, you feel like your country is not on the right track. What will you do about it? And that sense of service, whether that's through athletics or whether that's through what my parents and my family has taught me, is that you step up and you do something about it. And it's been amazing to see the camaraderie between the two of you. And even though y'all just met each other, that connection y'all have, that bond, it's similar to, I see a football player, somebody played at Clemson, and, we see each other. There's a brotherhood there, and there's a connection and a brotherhood and sisterhood that connects y'all too, and it's tangible. And I think that is true of America, and we gotta remember who we are. We are Americans first, and if we remember that, it's nothing that we can't accomplish. We run to the fight every single time. So I will make sure, and you have my word, absolute word, that I will always give veterans and military the respect that they deserve, because it's not even a request, it's a requirement. And so I will definitely do that. I want to thank.
He's a hero.
Oh, he's definitely a hero. Both of y'all.
I want to tell you one thing, Hank, do you know about Walterboro, that there was an air base there for the Tuskegee Airmen? Yeah,
absolutely.
I had the honor of working for Chappie James.
Yeah, okay.
We're talking now.
Chappie James was the first Black 4-star general in the United States Air Force.
And he was a force to be reckoned with. He was fantastic. Everybody loved him.
Loved it. Well, I definitely appreciate that. And I'm gonna make sure both of y'all have each other contact information. We're gonna make it. And again, everyone who's listening to this amazing conversation, thank you for joining Views from the Fifth. We will have great conversations to come down the road next week, and then following all the way to November 3rd, to make sure that we're addressing the issues of this district and being thoughtful about it, bringing the experts to the table, having deep conversation, and making sure that policy reflect that. So again, thank both of you for being on tonight, and thank you for joining in, and let's get to work. Have a good night.
Good luck, Mo.
Thank you.
Good luck. It's nice meeting you, Hank.
Same here. Take care.